Hello, everyone. Hi, welcome to the library. My name is Orlando Lugo. I want to start by acknowledging that I have a raspy voice today. I am a little under the weather, but it's perfect because my voice is a little deeper for public speaking. So it worked out, I think. All kidding aside, I want to welcome everyone to the library, and I want to acknowledge that we are on the I want to acknowledge that we are on indigenous land and the traditional territories of the Coast Salish people. Um, let me get out of the way. I'm actually blocking this. Okay. So I thank you all for coming tonight. Please take a moment to silence your cell phones, but don't put them away completely because we are live tweeting tonight. And you can also live tweet with us. You can use the hashtag Yəhaw at SPL, actually Yəhaw SPL, and Indigenous SPL. So you can follow us online doing that. If you need restrooms, they are on this floor, just around kind of the dark red room back out there, whatever. There are also gender neutral restrooms on level 3 that y'all can use. If you need help with those, we're here to help. So I will speak no further. I will hand the mic to Tracy, and we'll get started.
Oh, I could do it like that. All right. Hey, everybody. My name's Tracy Rector, and I'm one of the producers for this experience today, as well as the installation of Yəhaw here at the Seattle Public Library. Before we get into a little bit more information, I want to first invite up my colleague, Aja Tail, because we want to acknowledge these amazing artists who have entrusted us with your time and your work and your creativity. We're just so very grateful that you helped us to launch Yəhaw, and you can hear better this way. All right. We're just so very grateful that you helped us to launch Yəhaw, and it's important to us to acknowledge your presence today, as well as all the contributions that you have given to the energy of this exhibit. We have at the far end of the table Denise Emerson, Patu Pitt, Sean Gallagher, Rowdy, and Fox Spears. And a hearty thank you to our colleagues here at the Seattle Public Library, too. We truly, truly appreciate the partnership. So thank you. Again, we are on Coast Salish territories, the traditional territory of the Duwamish people, and it's always good to gather here in this way. When we gather together, we are doing good work. We're bringing medicine to the space. We are uplifting one another, and so thank you for taking your time out today to share this moment with us. The library's Indigenous Sovereignty Series and Yəhaw were made possible through the support of the Seattle Public Library Foundation and Na'a'ili Fund. Special thanks again to our artist, our curator, Denise Emerson. This was her first curated show. Round of applause, because it's a big deal. It's a lot of work. And then just again, I want to extend my appreciation thanks to my colleague, Aja Tail, who's really a visionary for quite a bit of this work that we are launching here in the traditional territories of the Coast Salish people. You can find out more information about Yəhaw at yehawshow.com. Also, I want to give thanks to everyone who helped to organize and indigenize the library here at the Seattle Public Library, centering Native American communities and making space to consider how libraries can be relevant and accountable to Coast Salish and urban Indian families here in the Seattle area. Please share your ideas for what we should do in the future via our program surveys, which are located in the back. After the panel, we'll have a few moments to fill out those surveys as well. Also, if you are taking photos or want to talk about your experience here, please use the hashtag IndigenousSPL. So that's hashtag INDIGENOUSSPL, as well as Yəhaw Show. After our artist panel, we have an amazing film called Rumble, and it's all about the natives throughout history, but within our contemporary time period through the last 150 years who've contributed to the music here in the lands now called the United States, specifically to rock. It's really uplifting and fun and kind of shocking and surprising where Native people have contributed to the whole beauty of American music. And your opinions matter again, so we look forward to you filling out our surveys at the end of the artist panel, and thank you, and we'll start now. Denise. All right, and we will go straight to Denise to present on her work here at the Seattle Public Library.
This is our home where we belong is a statement that I was raised with. My mother taught me that we all belong here because I am Skokomish. I am enrolled Skokomish. I am Navajo on my father's side. I was raised here in Seattle. But even though we were raised in Seattle, we had very strong connections to our reservations. My parents took us to visit family on the reservations. They taught us how to live there, what it was like for them growing up there. So we were very much a part of our families on the reservations. And my mother taught me that wherever I walk within Seattle or along the coast here or anywhere near Skokomish, along the river there, she taught me that this is where your people come from, Denise. This is who you are. This is where your people were before we were moved onto the reservation. So she taught me the whole land of where the river runs, and we belong there. That's where we lived for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. And, you know, she was angry when she drove me around and taught me, but I learned that where our family traditionally lived along the river. And she took me up to Lake Cushman, where one of my great-great aunts lived. So part of Lake Cushman was a part of our family too. She drove me all over, and then she taught me that all of us people around here knew each other. We all knew about each other because we would feast at least once a year where people would marry within other tribes. And she's, you know, I was curious about that. She's like, I'm growing up today. And so I asked her, well, how did we get here? And she said, by canoe. We canoed our way down to Lake Washington, and we all feasted together in the fall, at least once a year. And being a kid, I asked her again, well, how did we get back? And she said, by canoe. It was just a harder trip back because we had to go against, you know, the flow of the river. But she did teach me that we married within like the Swinomish and the Tulalip, the Lummi. She taught me that we were all connected all the time, that it wasn't just because of the treaties we got separated, but we still celebrated with each other. Those teachings that she gave me were very, very important because it gave me a foundation of who I am as a Native person, and knowing that I belong to the Skokomish and they belong to me. Those are very strong words that my father taught me. He taught me that you are Navajo and you belong to the Navajo and they belong to you. You are Skokomish. They belong to you. You know, it goes both ways, who you belong to. And so I've always known where I belong. And when I live here in the city, it's a little bit harder, but I do meet, you know, Indigenous people on the street, and I acknowledge them because I know that we belong to each other, and I give them that respect and that honor. And that was a part of what I was thinking when I was curating the show, is I had to reach back to what my parents taught me and really think about how my father really honored the land and how he felt lucky to have married my mother because she was Skokomish and she was rich. He said all she had to do was walk out the door and there was food everywhere. And so he didn't think of wealth as in a monetary way, but it was a way of living, because he grew up on the Navajo reservation where it was harder. They had to work the land every day if they wanted to eat. So my parents teaching me where I come from and the history of my family, really, it was the foundation of me to be able to go out the door every day as a kid, knowing that I was Navajo and Skokomish. And there were hard times with playmates or my playmates as parents, but I was able to go home. My mother would reshape me again and say, "You're Navajo and Skokomish, that's all that matters." And I would go back out and play with my friends. And as I got older, I was able to carry that on my own with my parents having to constantly remind me of that I am who I am because of my parents, and I am Navajo and Skokomish. They taught me a lot of cultural ways, and one of them was my father painting. And this was my curatorial statement. It's long, but I'll talk as people can read that. They taught me how they lived off the land, because I was always curious. I would lay in bed with my mother and ask her different questions, and she answered them. And I talked to my father differently, and he explained that it was really hard on the Navajo reservation. But he also taught me that being a woman was very important to Navajo people, that they are a matriarchal tribe, and I was special to him because I was his oldest and I'm female. And so I held a very special place for him. And his uncles, or my uncles, his brothers, have taught me, they continue that teaching with me. They're constantly teaching me when I go visit them how important I am to them, being their brother's oldest daughter. Growing up with being Native and having Native pride, I learned, I practiced art form in many ways growing up. And I sketched and I drawed and I painted, I sewed. And then I went to beading classes in the summer of 1967 with my mother. And I loved to bead. I mean, it just took off. And I did as much as I could as I understood it at that time. And so I attended the Institute of American Indian Arts, where I learned a lot more about beadwork. I learned how to fringe. I learned how to back my work. I learned how to design my beadwork on graph paper with color pencils. And so this is one of my designs of incorporating text with image. And this is the Edward Curtis photograph. I think I designed this about almost 10 years ago. And it takes about a year to design. This was my second bag. It was another Edward Curtis photograph. There are many compositions when I create a design. It takes a year. There are about 20 iterations of these compositions. I have to figure out where the text goes, what colors I'm going to use, what do I want to highlight, what don't I want to highlight. This is my third bag. This is my latest bag. I really worked hard at incorporating Skokomish symbology into it. And then after I graduated from the UW, from the graphic design program, and I started doing more and more text with image, and I realized that I wanted to do treaty art, treaty beadwork. So I designed a necklace with a treaty on it. And it's interesting because I wanted I want people to know that they still exist, they're still alive. We still follow them. And I just wanted to bring it forward to this time and have attention on it to educate people. And this one was purchased from the Washington State History Museum for their collections. And I wanted earrings. I love earrings. So I had to make earrings. I've worn them several times, and when I do wear them, people stop and ask me, what does that mean? And I talk to them, and it's exactly what I wanted to happen, was people to question me. And I can talk to them. I'm Skokomish. I'm from my mother's tribe. I was born out there. I would visit my family there. So I want people to know that this is our treaty. And I've had doctors ask me, I had dentists ask me, I've had people on the bus ask me, and it's exactly what I wanted to happen. And it's a really good feeling when I can talk about them. And this was my first mother and baby necklace and earring set. It came from an Edward Curtis photograph. I love the image of mother and baby because the way my father raised me, women are important. And so I'm really becoming more focused on women, motherhood, and babies. And I just love that image. And this was my first set. And this, that beadwork came into this poster design. I had to put something Navajo in there because I am Navajo. I created a Navajo woman necklace called Shinali. She became a poster. This is one of my latest works of a historical photograph of women and their babies. This is a bead design I still need to bead. Another one I need to bead. And this is from a parfleche bag, from a Skokomish basket. And when my nephew had a baby, I took one of my designs and transferred it into cloth. In my future work, I want to continue beading. I want to acrylic paint dreams that I've had about my father the night he died. The dream that he gave me away to Jeanette and her family. It was my wedding. It was a wedding dream. And he told me he was giving me away to her family. And I was scared because I hadn't even met her yet. And he said, that's who you belong to now. And they were singing, and as I walked by them, he was taking me to them, and it was a dream. And then a month later, I met Jeanette, and it was the same people in my dream. And I thought it was such a beautiful thing when I met her through my dream, and then I met her on the ferry. And then I want to paint memories of my grandmother weaving a rug. I would lay in bed like at 5 o'clock in the morning, and she'd be humming and singing to her rug weaving to put good thoughts into her rugs. And that's another vision that I have to paint.
Thank you. I don't know. Double down. Am I doubling? Oh wait, no. All right, I'm Patu Pitt. I'm half of Native Cut. Sean Gallagher is the other half. I'm from the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs, which is located in Central Oregon. Originally I'm from along the Columbia River and its tributaries. We are somewhat located in our traditional homeland, but kind of on the what feels like the edge sometimes. If you're familiar with Oregon, there's Mount Hood. We're on the other side of Mount Hood. So if you just follow the Cascades down, basically, we're right there as far as where our reservation's located.
My mom's side of the family, I'm from Portland. I'm also Yakima and Pitt River. And some of the things that that's kind of like an unfinished piece that I started here, and I'll probably put this person into a canoe, I decided. But that's a little bit of a loose self-portrait, just kind of the kinds of things that I like to do. A few years back, I was able to be on the Columbia River with my people, and it really meant a lot to me. Ichiwana, or Weemel, is our traditional name for that. And I met my partner at art camp, and actually we were both camp counselors there. And there was also a Skokomish person there who was teaching carving, and so that's where I got to start learning a little bit with the carving stuff. And prior to that experience, I had started in with block prints because it gave me that feeling of carving and making things. And another kind of powerful piece to that experience was just kind of meeting people like you, because Chinook jargon is based upon partly my tribal language and partly Haida, and it's kind of the trade language of this area. And so we have a lot culturally in common with the Skokomish people and the Lashutsi speaking people of this area. And so for me, as somebody from Oregon that's quite Oregonian, I actually consider this Oregon territory. That it feels good to, even though like my heart's definitely in my traditional homeland, it feels good to be a guest here, and with a special shout out to the Duwamish people, because as an environmental person, that's something that I'm always thinking about, is that river and the spirit of that river, and how much does that river do to us and do for us, and just has a really beautiful spirit, and hoping to make my work kind of more relevant in that way. And so I had fun with it. These two people are from my tribe. When we actually got married, we did have paddle dancers at the wedding. We had a cultural exchange between the King Island and Nupiat people, or Nupiat more broadly, and then the Warm Springs Wasco dancers. And the paddle dance is still a part of our traditions that we're able to carry forward, which feels really good. Wherever these people are, I tend to feel just really happy and connected. And I think something that I wanted to put them in there just to show that our young people are always kind of putting their best foot forward. And that's kind of something as an older person that I'm just really happy about and proud of, because I think one of the challenges that I have with the artistic process is like feeling like I can have freedom to really represent myself. And that's something I'm really grateful to the Yəhaw program for creating that space, because I think a lot of times the world's been pretty invalidating, and there isn't, it's like Warm Springs, never heard of that. And it's like, well, it's the people from this area, broadly this area. But it just how often we meet people that haven't heard anything about us or have some type of judgment about us. And so for me, I'm trying to let the experience change me a little bit. And part of that being like take up a little more space and create more time for myself to do things like this. And that's something that these youth do. Like, they're going to practice. They are learning things that are being taught that their grandmothers taught them. And that's kind of what else inspired me through this process, is just the grandmother's love and how that carries on. And part of that is like they might not ever know the grandma or grandpa that taught these teachings originally, but they have that love with them, and they're going to carry that forward with someone else. And in the background, there's a kind of like a transformer from the power lines, because that's very much a part of the impact that our generations live with. And for me, I think the other part of it is like, as far as creating that space, it's hard to not get into that like poverty porn zone when you speak your truth, and really having ownership of that. Because like for me, my generation, a lot of my generation died, and that's like really, really hard for me to deal with on a daily basis, and that's something I really carry with me. But with that said, I try to get out there and represent and show face, and then also put out there that I'm one of many people. I'm like very much a part of a diverse constituent. And so this one, it's a little harder to tell what's happening here, but I call her the tail end of my generation. We're from the same block, basically. Her grandmother and great-grandmother kind of raised a lot of us, and her great-grandmother only spoke the language. That's how my grandmother was too. So when I lost my grandmother, I just kind of felt like I was absorbed a little bit into their household. But she's the youngest tribal member elected to tribal council. She's definitely not afraid to use her voice. She's definitely encouraging me. I'm like, oh, I'm feeling kind of like a bee right now. She's like, guys don't have to shrink that back. You go with that. And so I've found our relationship to really be positively validating, and I think I've helped challenge her too, because I have like a philosophy, bring your broken self. Like, you don't always have to be perfect. You don't always have to be 100%. Just bring it, and we'll create space for that. And I wanted to also show like the relationship with her dad, because I think that's a Wasco specific thing where, like there's a special relationship. I think kind of like what Denise described too, like where the father-daughter relationship is really powerful. And her dad is a Vietnam veteran too. And that's kind of a common theme that I have when I'm thinking about my work, is how to make spaces more healing informed. And this is a throwback pot too. It's the berry picker in the woods, because I think a lot of our trauma comes from resource extractive policies that the BIA really imposed on our peoples. And so I like to try to find creative ways to bring those issues to light. And this picture, the found object, is actually a Navajo mill too. But I have like, and it's from a library, actually, a library getting rid of their stuff. I'm like, ooh, I'll take those. And so that was like what else about this experience that's been really awesome. Also, I'm a big fan of foxes, and I was like super intimidated to be like, ooh, I'm gonna be in the same group as fox. But that's kind of one of the things, is just really like appreciate Yəhaw for making that deliberate space for all of us to come together and be a part of the experience. It is really awesome to have been able to participate in it in that way, and really take the time out to bring to light some of these things that I would like to have more out in the universe, and to step into that space. And of course, like, my goal is to help create space for other people to do the same. And I've really had a lot of fun working with Native youth in the past, and I know I've been getting some more interest in having people, either learn from people or teach with people. And I think that's like one of the fun things about getting to be a part of an experience like this. And especially in Seattle, where I've gotten to see some of you or work really, really closely with some of you. And, and then I might leave, go back to my res, and then might come back. But just to have these things kind of keep coming full circle, because that is something that we tend to experience within our, for me at least, is like, oh, I got gentrified out of this neighborhood. What's the next thing? But Yəhaw kind of creates some of that stability in that space.
Hello. I'm Sean Gallagher. I'm a Yəhaw Artist. My Yəhaw name is Sarak. Oh, closer, guys. Sorry. I don't do public speaking very often, so bear with me. I'll do my best. A little bit about myself. I started doing art when I was very young. Both my uncles are stone carvers, so it was always around that. As far as back as I can remember. I'm an artist. I'm also a union member, ILW Longshore Union. That's the other part of me, which I'm very proud of. I do a lot of art that encompasses climate change and kind of reveals that and shows the effects of climate change within our communities based on what is happening to the animals. So I did a series of a walrus series. It was part of this big show that I was doing. It was at Vermilion Gallery, but I made a series of walrus masks to highlight the effects the climate change that is having on the walrus population, and to also create a discussion around that. And essentially, I wanted to highlight the fact that it's going to have a huge impact on our communities in Alaska, because we depend on these animals for survival. Because we don't go to the grocery store like most people do. Over half of our food supplies are within the areas that we're from. So this is a huge concern for people. This is some of my 2D work. This is Owl Transcendence. Yeah, I'm gonna move through some of these pretty quickly. Yeah, this is a piece that I did. It's an owl transformation piece. I want to highlight what was happening with the owl populations and also how they're dependent on rodent populations for survival. And rodent populations are on decline because of the permafrost is melting at a rapid rate, and rodents are dying in exponential numbers. So these snow owls are about 30% of what they used to be because of this problem. And that's kind of what I wanted to highlight through this. And I wanted to display the transformation piece to go with like how these animals are connected to us, and like that's what I'm doing with this piece right here, particularly. Yeah, so this is a part of a 3-part series. It's called The Point of No Return. It's kind of depressing, actually. It's about the permafrost melting and releasing gigatons of methane gas, which is a gas that's much more potent than a greenhouse gas that's much more potent than CO2. And so if this happens, then yeah, I mean, we're pretty much doomed. But anyway, sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah. Yeah, I have like I should also say that my name, Asarik, was given to me by my aunts. It means dark person. So I don't know if that has any, it has a lot to do with my personality, but yeah. And my artwork is kind of dark, sorry. So anyway, this is a piece I did. It's an egg protector. It's also another one that's reflecting climate change and the effect on fecundity with egg fecundity with birds within the tundra area that rely on frozen landscapes to reproduce, and that's becoming more of a limiting factor within those areas as well. And I want to highlight that situation with this piece and the seriousness of it. And yeah, this is a walrus piece that's part of the 3-part series that I described earlier. This is another transcendence piece I've done with spray paint. I used to do spray paint art when I was younger, when I was more of a delinquent. So I kind of like it's kind of carried on through my art. I do a lot of stuff with spray paint, and that's from that part of my life. But this is another piece that I did. I haven't actually named this one yet. I wanted to reflect the effects, everything that's happening on polar bears, and this is kind of a depiction of a polar bear stepping into a black hole, not knowing where it's going to go into the future with this big massive thing happening. Oh, okay, yeah, this is another one. Sorry, I should probably talk about the carving that I did here at the at the artist residency. It's over there. It's that big head and shoulders bust piece. That's what I did during my stay here. I was used the library as a resource to study anatomy and to get a better idea on how to carve something like that, because I've mostly done mass work my whole life. So that was a good exercise on research that I was able to use the library to do and execute really well. And I feel like I'm out of time. Yeah. All right, cool.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right.
This might be a little easier to
Okay.
speak into the mic.
Cool, thank you. Can I stand up by the computer? Hi everyone. Hi. Just take a little break, stretch up and down, reach, move up. Hi. I'm going to put on a timer so I know that I'm on time. Hello. Hi everyone. How are you all doing? Good, good. Thank you again, Tracy Aja, for allowing me to be a part of this. It's been a really amazing experience, and also to the panelists and to the art that I was able to be surrounded by while I was here in the residency, to Denise, to the exhibition that was there. I love when I first walked in, I saw some artists that I met, like Kimberly. I made a turtle shell rattle like the day before I got to the residency, so that was really lovely to see. Also the wood carving pieces there, live in the space, and to Fox too. For you coming on one of the days that I was here, it was nice to kind of feel interconnected too. So thank you so much. Click. That's me right there when I was young and fresh. Years ago. But my name is Rowdy. I am from Guam. It's one of the Pacific Islands way off in the blue continent. I moved here when I was 18 for college, and I've been here since. So I've been trying to figure out what does it mean to live on the land, to be indigenous, but not on the lands of your ancestors. And so I've been trying to figure out how to maintain connections, know the stories of the land here, and also to kind of be humbled by the awesome spirit that's here too as well. So that is Guam. It's a t-shirt that I have. We like flowers, lots of flowers too, super tropical. But you may know Guam as an American territory. Yes, we are highly militarized. We have one of the largest military bases in the US. And this was taken right after World War II, when the US ended up, they say saving, but I like to say invading Guam too as well. I love those two because if you look at the flag, it's just made out of the stick that they use is just a sugar cane, and they tied a flag to it. And these are little boys that are being able to, what's the word, show, I guess, a little propaganda a little way. But a lot of my work deals with land, a lot with body, a lot of, I think, body sovereignty too as well. So some of the first things I did was photo series based on indigenous people from the Pacific. These are two of my friends, Dakota and John, and they wanted to find ways, they're also Chamorro too, they want to find ways to still be Chamorro here in this land. So Dakota's on the left, those are some seashells that they brought with them from the island. They were born here in Duwamish territory, but they moved to Guam for a little bit, came back, and they were, I like to say, super Chamorro. Like they want to be Chamorro everything. And so I was like, okay, let's do a photo series. And so this is a this is a beach that they wanted on their back. So kind of looking at tattooing in a way. And John was, who's queer, wanted to look at how do you present Pacificness, especially when you live in an urban setting too. So a lot of this work wanted to work with kind of expression of body. And so I started to do some teaching gigs with schools. So this was done with the Seattle Girls School, where we work with mixed race students, and they looked at this idea like, what is it to be two things? And so this is one of the portraits that the students did, which I think is really lovely. It's like this Whoville kind of look. I love that boa. And then I also work at the Wing Look Museum in Chinatown, and so we did a summer camp, and I was a teaching artist there, and we looked at superheroes. And this is one of the superheroes that this person made. They wanted to be called AAG, or Asian Activist Girl. And so let me read. It says, Asian activist girls are superheroes fighting justice. The enemies are gentrification, racism, and other rights that need to be fought for. They ride a horse named Vanilla Kit Kat and carry swords of peace. And so their favorite foods are pandesal, pansi, adobo, watermelon, mango, etc. Favorite drink, watermelon slushy with lychee jelly. And so I worked with about 15 kids, and they created their own superheroes, looking at what they wanted to fight and protect. And then we placed them all around the museum, and people got to go on and give them a quarter, and they got to like talk to them too as well, like a living museum. So I like this idea of creating spaces like what Patu was saying, creating spaces for youth to actually really express and find ways to feel centered in their voice too. I also do some performance art too. I do drag sometimes. Me as a gay man, I like to dress up sometimes. And so this is a look that I did for a pageant based on some of the Catholic dolls that were really present in Guam. Guam is a super Catholic place. We were colonized in the 1500s by Spain, and we have been Catholic ever since. And so I wanted to become this doll. I made this rosary out of bamboo flooring. And for this pageant I was in, I just kind of dragged it along the floor as kind of like a ball and chain, which religion is kind of sometimes is. But then I also wanted to do some printmaking too. So this is the one on the right is the first print that I did based on cave drawings found on the island. And so this one right here is what you usually see on like regalia, on like clothing. But I was like, what about the other ones? What about the other ones too? So I'm trying to do a series based on all the other cave paintings too. And this is one of the ones that kind of stuck out to me, which I was able to show at the Guam Museum a couple years ago. I also do some sculpture too, based on sea urchins. And this is actually the one on the right I really love because there was this festival in Guam called Festival of the Pacific Arts, where all the artists from the Pacific get to meet in one island and just share culture, dance, music, tattooing. And I got to work with Maori artists who brought earth from New Zealand, and I got to mix it with earth from Guam, and I created these little pieces based on some ceramic motifs that we have there too. I also like poetry, and so there's a time when I was really falling in love and falling out of love, and so I wanted to try to have poetry in my native language. So some of them, the one I wrote before was like, before you, Malefatu Mangwaidza, I forgot how to love. But now my heart swells like the ocean meeting land once again. So I'm thinking about how do you love too, because I think love is so super important in healing, right? And then I was having a really hard time with love, and so I started making some other ones too. So the one in the middle was like, I swam until I was lost, floating aimlessly. I searched the skies for an answer until a bird shit on me. And so I wanted to find ways to like turn like hard love into kind of just transform it into something else, because I think words are really fun. And also I think for myself as an Indigenous person, as a queer person, as a person who's mixed race, working class, first time going to college, you know, I don't see these stories here, so sometimes you have to make it yourself, right? At my work at the Wing Luke, I also curate, and so looking at climate change, I was able to work with a Pacific artist looking at climate change from a Pacific viewpoint, and we will use stories, sculpture, poetry, weaving as a way to look at the ways that my islands in the Pacific are actually disappearing. With waters are rising, it tends to, like, who am I going to be without an island, right? And so this is kind of some of the stories that I want to work to as well. My newest work is going to be at the Wing Luke. It's going to open next week on Thursday. It's going to be looking at Indigenous futurism or Pacific futurism with an ode to like Afrofuturism too, like the idea like how do we talk ourselves into the future? And I think a lot of the times, my communities, we always look at the past. We live in the past, but not in the future. So what do we look like? How do we project? And how do we look at ourselves 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 years from now? What do we want that to look like? And so this is a friend of mine who's looking at duality in a way, looking at this idea of how do you honor, not the masculine and feminine, but how do you honor the warrior and healer in you? You always have that. And so I usually am a healer. I need to be more of a warrior. So I need to try to find ways to kind of stand up. So thank you again for giving me space to practice that warrior spirit, but also to honor the healer in me too as well. So thank you so much.
Okay, I'm gonna stay here because I'm more comfortable. But my name is Fox Spears, Aiki. I grew up in and around Seattle, but I am an enrolled member of the Kuruk tribe. I put a map up there just because no one knows who we are, where we're from up here. So our ancestral homeland is in the sort of red oval there along the Klamath River. It's in Northern California, just south of the Oregon border. We obviously were a salmon tribe as well, so I think there's a lot of similarities with some of the Northwest tribes here too, which I think are interesting. Basketry is important to a lot of indigenous, a lot of indigenous cultures for sure. It's definitely important for Northern California. This is an Edward Curtis photograph, and I look to basketry a lot as a source of inspiration for the printmaking that I do. In the photograph, there's a variety of different shapes of baskets. There's all sorts of different designs. And these were items that were used every day, all the time. There's hats, there's storage baskets, cooking baskets, all sorts of different things. Even if something wasn't, didn't have a physical purpose, it was still maybe a ceremonial object. And then these are just some other baskets as well that are probably from around the same time period, actually. But these are by a master weaver named Elizabeth Hickox, and I just think her work is interesting because, as America expanded, there was also the creation of basketry for viewing and collecting. So these were made to be pieces that people would collect and own. They're made to be looked at, but her work is beautiful. So this is I think a good example of how my work relates to that. There's a couple baskets on the other side there. They're these very simple repeating triangle patterns, and they're probably the patterns that I worked with the most at first. The print there is actually based off of the basket below. And you can kind of see the shapes repeating there. But I definitely am not trying to specifically recreate the exact same thing there. I'm usually working to reinterpret it into a two-dimensional design. I do a lot of work with pattern, obviously, a lot of layering. I'll share some images of some past prints as well. Red ink is probably one of the things that I use almost all the time, and I do cut out my own stencils as well. I work in monotype, so usually everything is one of a kind. It's not like I'm creating an edition of the exact same thing. But I do work within a series, so obviously I use the same stencil here. This one I actually used yellow, which is surprising for me. Here's another one as well, red and blue. That's pretty similar to me. I'm always fascinated as well by the geometric patterns on baskets. I'm usually looking specifically at basketry from my tribe or the neighboring tribes, as we were very culturally similar. But there are so many patterns that you find in different tribes all over the place, across the world even, where it's like, oh, like I recognize that, or you can find so many similarities. This was a piece that I did as a collaboration. I had a friend who was making a rainbow roll, so from the white to the very dark blue, for some pieces of her own work, and she made me a couple, so I layered them with my designs over. This I did earlier this spring. Again, just I do a lot of patterns over over more. I'm losing my word for it. Kind of the contrast between these very sharp patterns and the more fluid pieces. That one actually also, I didn't even realize it until maybe 3 months after I'd made it, that one of my triangles on the stencil is actually off a little bit from where it should be, which doesn't really bother me. I think it's a success because you kind of don't even notice it. And then it's like, oh yeah. Where? It's kind of, so the top row, one of the bottom triangles, it should actually be shifted over to be centered under a piece. But it's, it's fine. So for what I was doing with the residency, I was really thinking about water. Having grown up in and around Seattle, and I live in West Seattle now, the living on Duwamish land, all of these things together were really what I was thinking about. This is a map from the Waterlines project. And so the image on the, the left there shows, the original path of the Duwamish River. It shows the tide flats that were existing in the southern part of Elliott Bay. It was just very different, and that's around, the 1850s. And then looking at it today, obviously the shoreline has changed. Those tide flats are completely gone. The river itself has been straightened out. It used to wind through Boeing Field, and all of this really has happened, in less than 200 years. So it's something that I think about, human activity and the impact on the land. The Duwamish River is a Superfund site. There's, a dramatic amount of pollution, but the role that this river played for so long, millennia before it was changed so quickly. So I ended up making a series of 10 prints, and I incorporated this image of the Duwamish as it was into the type of work that I usually do. This is a close-up. I made the prints before I came to the library, so I came with them already, and then I was doing a little finishing work while I was here, so kind of drawing and stitching into the print, just to sort of finish it a little bit, mainly around the central portion to give it more definition. This is another one. I'm not going to show all 10, but you can see this one. Well, actually, here, let me go to this. It's a little closer up. So the left is the source image I had found that I was working with. It's from an early Seattle claim map in the 1850s. It shows these different plots of land and who had made the claims. At the top, there's Henry Esler and Doc Maynard, so some familiar names. And so I was kind of redoing that. I initially was really fascinated with the map and was intending to really put the claims into all of the prints, and I ended up only doing it on 2 of them, partly because it was really tedious and fussy when I was printing all these little things on it, and then partly because I was like, well, that wasn't actually what I wanted to represent in most of them. So you can see in this other one as well, that was a photo taken while I was working on it, so I was poking holes in them and doing the thread versus actually stitching as I went. That would have been terrible, probably. But a lot of folks will ask me about my process for printmaking, so I wanted to share a little bit about that too. I am working on a plexiglass plate, and I have all my stencils cut out. So this on the left shows the stencils that are all cut out. They've been inked. They're placed exactly where I want them. And then you can see how the plate is sitting in a jig. It's ready to have the paper put down and run through the press. And I did start with all of the water pieces first. This is my workstation. So just kind of showing a little bit. Definitely with printmaking, ink can get everywhere. So I try to be very neat. And this is probably the neatest that I am in my life. Everything else is a little more disorganized. So usually then for the larger parts, these more natural things, like I will ink up the whole plate or put ink on parts of the plate, and then I'm masking off where I don't want the ink to transfer to the paper. I use torn paper quite a bit. This is just newsprint that I'll tear, and it's for the torn pieces, I'm just sort of tearing. Do I like what I have? Maybe I'll tear it or tear some other pieces. But it's kind of a very freeing part of the process. For the geometric patterns, I make my stencils, and these are definitely a little more controlled. It may be a little hard to see, but these ones take longer. I'm laying out my grid. I'm figuring out where the pattern needs to go exactly, and then I have to go in and cut it all out with an X-Acto knife. So these ones were a little larger than I usually work, and were challenging, but super fun to do as well. I actually kind of think a little bit, like I don't do weaving, but I'm doing my work based on baskets, and so I'm very inspired by that, and it feels like part of that process a little bit. This is just kind of showing one of the plates after I was doing my geometric patterns. I'm normally inking the plate, running it through multiple times to get a lot of ink off. Maybe I'll take the stencil off, put some other things down, that one is definitely near the end of its runs. And then, of course, the stitching. This is just a shot of the backside of one of the prints, so they definitely look different. And then last, it's really just the area up in the gallery. And I was just so grateful to be part of this. And coming in as the last artist, I was able to be in the space with work from Native Cut and Rowdy, and it was just beautiful. I really appreciated it. So thank you.
Thank you. So we're going to open up for a few questions. It's great to see so many people here. Thank you. First
Right,
off, do either one of you have a question for each other?
It's this shop question. I mean, like, what kind of paper do you use for your stencils? Oh, sorry.
This is a little easier.
For my stencils, normally I use Bristol paper, so it's like a heavier type of almost cardstock. For the larger one, I was using actually vellum, which is a little different, and it allowed some of the ink to transfer through. I have used Mylar sometimes, and I do save all my stencils, but I don't normally reuse them. I theoretically could, but they are kind of fragile, and that is, I'd say that's intentional. Like, I haven't done block printing or things like that. Not that I wouldn't. I think it's fascinating. Yeah.
All right, we'll take questions from the audience. I'm sure there's a lot out there. I have a ton of questions.
Question in the back.
Thank you, guys. Do I have to say my name or just? Anyway, I have a question for Mr. Number 3 from the beginning of the show.
Yeah, Sean Gallagher.
Oh, that's me? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, if you don't mind. I want to know if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
But I saw you on a lot of drawings, or you portray yourself at least a couple times in those stuff. First, I saw you on the brown head with a chocolate bird.
Yeah, I do that unintentionally, actually. It just happens. It's kind of weird. I don't know why that happens, but it does. Like, almost everything I draw or carve, it always represents me in some way. And just, I'm not sure why that happens, but it's completely unintentional. Yeah, just most things I carve, they'll resemble me in some way, but.
Thanks for your question.
And that looks like my uncle, which is kind of weird. Yeah, but I like to think that a lot of the carvings I do are representative of my ancestors as well. So if they represent me in that way, that's unintentional, but it's also a good, I don't know how to say it, like side effect of my artwork. I don't know, but yeah, sorry.
Another question from the audience. Up front?
Can we get the mic to you?
Hello. I just want to thank you. I'm just, it's hard for me to talk because I'm just so touched by you individually and collectively, the sharing of your personal journey, of your connection to your indigenous background and your families, and your personal identity journey, and the environment, and your visions, your personal visions and your art that represent all those journeys. I'm just so touched, and I just want to thank you. And I want to know, is there a way to, is there something on the website that will show the names of all the artists, and how do I follow some of your art and where you're showing, so that I can view your pieces and
So the question was, is there a way to follow each of the artists as well as to learn more about the show here and about Yəhaw? And you can go to the Seattle Public Library's website. There'll be information there. It's part of their Indigenous program. And you can also go to Yəhaw at YEHAW show.com. And on the library's website, we have information and tribal information and background information about each of the artists. And then also on our website, we do too, at yahawshow.com. There's an exhibit upstairs that will be up through December 9th. So you can go upstairs to see the actual work on display. Yes, on the 8th floor. Other questions? Yes.
Oh, Heidi, okay.
Hello. I was actually wondering, because thank you all for sharing so much about your work and where it comes from and how you're inspired. I'm wondering if each of you would also maybe briefly talk about what you want to be doing in the next upcoming time period, and like what things you're feeling drawn towards.
You want to start at this end? Maybe what's your upcoming work, and perhaps how people can find you if you want them to find you.
Some of my work will be in the Yəhaw King Street Station show. Starts March 23rd.
Thank you.
And I am currently working on a grant through the Washington State Center for Traditions. I am working with a niece. I am training her on how to do beadwork. She's 32, and I want to pass down what I know about beadwork to her. So that's a year's project. Other than vending and being looking for Native American art shows that I will apply for. I did apply for the Tacoma Glass 5-day residency, so I'm hoping to get into that show.
Okay, so yeah, I kind of keep a low profile. I think Native Cut on the good old Facebook is the best way to sort of track me right now. I'm a chair of Warm Springs Ventures for my tribe, and so some of my goals are kind of tactile, but I would like to see us get a little more with the short film put together that talks about like collaborations that we have. Like for instance, right now we have the I think it's Tamunwit, which is a Warm Springs artesian group, and at the board meeting I just keep repeating myself and hope that something happens, and thankfully a series of women have made it happen, and so we have a holiday market in one of our venues, and so that's really exciting for me. I hope to work more a little bit individually just on my own style, and I like to experiment, so get a little bit weirder. That's the goal. I think I'm open to collaboration with other people too, and that's something that I'm hoping to vibe with, and I would love to do a tiny bit more with film. And then Fern and I are talking tough. I just have a couple funny stories for her, but we're talking about the issue of appropriation and the ways that like people like the Boy Scouts or non-Native women get into our spaces and appropriate where our voices should be and the issues with that. And I think Fern is, sorry to put you on blast, Fern, is working on a play, because there's just so many ways, like how many ways can we say this kind of thing. And so I think it has to be all the ways to really help get it out there, how damaging this has been to Native women and our voices and getting that out there. But I think the other thing would be gathering. I keep talking about gathering theater with people and like not being in sync. And so I would love to get out there and get gathering and do some of those different types of things, and you know, just kick it with all kinds of people. I like the gender fluidity stuff, that exploration. I would love to see us have more spaces that aren't looking at things in the binary and like really seeing like what can we do, you know, as individuals, but also as a group.
If you want to check out some more of my work, you could check it out on SeanGallagher.info. That's a new website I just started. And yeah, also Native Cut. That's a good place. Some of the things that I would like to focus on in the future are I want to start doing life-size human sculptures. That's kind of like where I'm heading, because I feel like that would be a challenge, and also, it'd be fun. But and some of the future projects that I'm going to be working on is building. Well, yeah, like the site is undetermined, but this winter into spring, I'm going to be building a 32-foot like dugout-style canoe with it's a collaboration with a friend of mine. His name's Dahan. He's a great artist, but we're working on that together. But we're still ironing out the details, but it's definitely happening. And I'd like to do more work with skin boats, because I've been a skin boat builder since I was in my early 20s. So I kind of want to take that more seriously, and eventually I'm going to be I want to be working on a boat that would be encompassing King Island kayak construction, and also like people's history around it, which would be my family. And that's kind of more of a life goal. It's nothing I'm gonna do like right now, but I'm eventually gonna do that. In the next 15, 20 years. So that's kind of like the long game or whatever. But all right, yeah. Sure. Yeah. Oh, right now? Okay. Okay. It's it's like which name?
Native Cut.
Oh, Native Cut. Okay, yeah. Yeah, it's Native Cut with a K, so the cut part would be a K. But yeah. Sorry. I'm like spelling challenged.
Hi. So for me, there's a lot of things that I would love to do, and I'm sure everyone here wants to do many things. I think in the immediate future, want to try to get to the Honolulu Biennial. There is a bunch of Pacific Indigenous artists who'll be going there, creating this space called the Savage Club. So taking back the idea of what savage is in this kind of expression of fierceness and strong. So I want to try to go there, look at more adornment as an exploration for myself. I say that because for my culture, we were colonized since the 1500s, so we lost a lot of our traditions, a lot of our stories, a lot of our songs and chants and dances. So right now, we're making it all up right now. And so it's been a lot of questions about authenticity, like what is this, what is that? But I think the idea is, as long as you're creating something, it's still valuable, looking at the intention behind it too. But we're still trying to figure that out, like what is the philosophy behind what we wear, what we sing, how we dance, and how we move. And so I think for me, in the long term, I would love to create a cultural center where I'm from, where we have a home garden where we can teach young folks about the land and plants and animals, but also have a ceramic space where we can actually create pottery. In my culture, we used to have a strong pottery tradition, but it got lost during colonization. So we want to try to bring them back. Just a space to teach, because I think mentorship is really important. And I think for me, I wish I had mentors to help guide me, so I don't have to just keep picking things, but being like, hey, here's a direction you can go into. So I really love this residency, love hearing these panels and talking to other folks to be like, oh, okay, that's a philosophy I didn't think about, or that's an approach I didn't think about, or that's a material I didn't use too as well. So I think in the long term, I wanted to create a school, because I think education is super important for the next generation. Yeah.
This year, I'm finishing up a fellowship with First Peoples Fund in Artist and Business Leadership. So that's kind of a focus. I also, trying to think what else I have going on. I do have a corporate day job, so I'm always trying to balance balance everything, which is a challenge. But I'm so passionate about my art. The printmaking that I do, most of it I do at a place called Crow's Shadow Institute, which is outside of Pendleton, Oregon, on the Umatilla Reservation. And normally I'm going there for 4-day workshops. But they do artist residencies and fine art publishing of editions. So I've been talking to them about a possible residency in 2020. There was something else I was thinking about, but I can't remember. So you can find more about my work at my website. It's foxanthonyspears.com. I also have a page on Facebook as well. I'm trying to think. Yeah.
Tracy, do we have time for one last question or no?
Okay.
I work in the Seattle area. Thank you very much, all of you. I'm just very impressed and honored to have learned from you today. I'm wondering, can you help me know how to work with our youth that we're helping as our new elders? Because we have plastic issues, we've got the Duwamish River issues, we've got restoring natural habitat issues. I have personally benefited from programs of the Port Gamble Sklallam tribe who came to my elementary school when I was in 3rd grade, and they had immersion programs with the Carver families and the Weaver families, and I brought that to my life. I'm now almost 50, and I continue to do that work. As a non-native person, I feel responsible to do so, but also working with young people, I can see where they might be a little negative, and I need to be the positive to encourage them. I don't see how plastic is cool, but is there any way to like incorporate plastics into what we're doing in the future? And please consider working with young people. Thank you.
All right. I kind of still have a plastic habit, and I definitely drank Squeeze-Its in the 80s. I think part of like environmental work is like understanding like the systems and like, do the youth have water bottles? Is there a water refill station? Is there like culturally relevant plants in the water container? Are there like things like that really can help support like minimizing consumption, but also is some of that messaging coming from people from their community or communities that they identify with? Because I think like I went into the environmental sector because it's so judgy and it's like kind of like a high and mighty type mentality, and that's definitely not something that youth or myself like identify with. So I would like think about reaching out to like people that do kind of youth services with young Native people. I know there's like several in the Seattle area too to kind of continue like to answer that question. That could be Regular Sorging, that could be Na'a Ilihifan, that could be, I'm spacing out on the name of Sarah Sense Wilson's group, it could be Longhouse Media, Clear Sky, and then also like Got Green too, because of course like there's a more broad, diverse like group of people within our community. So like, and I think they get like what are some of those like barriers to having this discussion. I was super impressed with the Duwamish River Cleanup Coalition. And kind of how they're coming about things. But I think a big part of it is like what like Roldy talked about. It's like making that space for youth to kind of be the guide of that. And then also you can like this morning I was on the phone call with a high school student, like talking to her about all these issues too. And I'm like, what am I doing with myself? I'm on the phone, like my Saturday. But it was cool. She's like, well, I researched the Duwamish tribe, and they definitely didn't teach us enough about present-day Native Americans in my classroom. And this is somebody that's like actually coming from a more privileged place. And especially if you're working with Native students, we're not seeing our representation. And there's Nisqually tribe, their cultural program, Muckleshoot. So like, if you can ask some of those local tribes too, hey, can we do a field trip and bring up these things? I think they might be receptive to the kind of programming that you're looking for.
Thank you. Also, I feel if you have a chance to maybe try to find ways to fund and pay and pay students too. I think sometimes financial barriers could be a really great like impetus and have people be a part of something too. Not to say that you have to pay them in order to do it, but I think it helps people who may not have a chance to feel like maybe this is just a hobby, but it could be a career, or it could be something that they can really invest in and go to school with too as well. Because I think for me, working with youth, that tends to be helpful to know that they're going to get some kind of compensation for their work, because I think we all want compensation for our work. And so how do we honor that too?
So again, I would just like to say thank you to Denise Emerson, Patu Pitt, Sean Gallagher, Rowdy, and Fox Spears.